Hello everyone, welcome to the video. Today we are going to talk about a foundational concept called the box model. And when I say foundational, it is such a basic concept that it is literally everywhere and not everyone really talks about it because it's such a normal thing in the world of tech, right? And this is a concept that has been there since the very beginning of the web and it's still very active today and we really use it in whether you are a producer of tech or whether you are sort of a consumer. If you use or interact with websites, which I'm sure all of you do, you need to know about the box model, especially if you're a consumer. You really understand how you interact with different things. And if you are a producer, if you're an engineer or designer, this will really help you think about more creatively as to like how things are laid out on websites, as well as it will help you think logically and technically as to why and where different things are on a website, right? So box model is really all about what you see on the website and what you see starting from any image or text, anything that you see on the website, whether on a desktop or whether on your phone. The box model really will help you explain how things are laid out, how things are rendered, especially on the web browsers, right? And if you stay until the end of the video, I'll give you some background and story about sort of how this box model came to be and some contentions that were there in the industry about it. But to start, we're going to talk about three things that you must know about the box model. So let's just get started with that. So the first thing that you should really know is that everything on the web is a box. That is the idea of the box model, right? So in order for you to understand this, I'm going to give you some real examples here, right? Because that's the most easiest thing to sort of understand what the box model really means, right? And so if you look at this website, this is a very common website, the Amazon.com website. And you probably already understand what I mean when I say everything on the website is sort of made up of boxes, right? Because this is something very easy to see right here, right? So if you think about this, if I select this image right here and let's say I draw something on it to just show you box means, right? So if I draw this, you'll see that this is a box, right? This is very easy to understand. If I create a stroke here, if I remove the fill, you see that this is one of those boxes. It's very clear. I'm going to just highlight it just to show you what it means, right? So this is very evident that you have these boxes right here. This is one box, this is one box, right? But even beyond that, everything else that you see is basically a box, right? So like not only these cards, but when you think about, let's say, this text box right here, right at the very top of the website, this is also a box, right? And even beyond that, if you think about it, it's not just the text box, but even the text inside the text box is a box, right? So like that is what you have to understand. That is what the box model is trying to explain, is that anything on the website, even the text inside the text box, is basically a box. That's how your browser is understanding where to place things, right? It understands that there needs to be some space here between your text and this sort of all sort of modular section here. So that is how it understands that even this text here is basically a box, just like up here, right? So it's basically a text like this within the bigger text box. Same with every other element on this website, whether you look at the logo, whether you look at this text, these are all boxes. This is not just one box, but rather these are all boxes. What I mean by that is that this logo is here, box, so something like this, right? Similarly, if you think about the rest of the text, that is also a box. This one here, right? This is a box. And then if you look at the text below that, that one is also a box, right? And what you might understand is that all of these three boxes are probably inside another bigger box, right? And then this box is basically inside another box, which is the whole navigation bar, right? So if you look at this huge navigation bar on the top, that is the biggest of all boxes, which is covering it, right? So basically that is what the box model is telling. And it's probably very easy to understand from this website, where you see that anything on this website is very easily laid out, where everything is a box, right? So let's look at another website to maybe help you understand. When you look at something like Wikipedia, right, it's not very easily evident that every single thing on this website is a box, right? So for instance, let me show you how it is actually a box, right? So here, what you will see is like we have two very clear sections, right? So if you look at this website, it's very evident, right? If you create a box up top right here, This is one box, and I'm going to reduce the opacity so you just see the content behind it, right? This is one big box, right? Now within this box, there are many more boxes, right? So if you just duplicate that box, I'll show you. This is probably one more box right here. So within this one big box, we have this other box right here, just holding this one single piece of content, right? Similarly, we have more smaller and smaller boxes inside, like maybe this one section is one box. And then below that, if you come down here, this is probably one other box, right? And then if you come down below that, right, this is one other box right here, right? So we have three boxes. And even within this, if you look at this really, really carefully, we have more boxes, right? We have this English as a box. We have this, every single of these languages that they're shown, these are all just boxes. Even this image that looks like a sort of circular image, that is also a box, right? So everything that you see on this website is a box. And that is what the box model is trying to tell you, that anything that you see, you should really understand these are looking very creatively placed and very nice looking, very dynamic. But even then, it's very easy to understand when you see this as like just boxes stacked on top of each other, right? That's what it is. Even think about the Google homepage. It's a very simple homepage, but everything here is a box. I mean, this is something very simple but very easy to understand. Something like the Google logo itself is a box. Something like the text box here is a box. And each of these buttons are probably a box. And then there's probably a bigger box that covers both of those boxes, right? So these are just laid out as boxes, right? And that is something, such a foundational concept that really helps you understand. If it's just boxes on the web, it might look circular, it might look very dynamic in shapes, but even then, it's just boxes, right? And while this concept really just applies mostly to web browsers and what you see on like Chrome or Edge or things like Firefox or Safari, this same idea or concept could be used to think about your apps, right? So this is screenshot of the Airbnb app, and you clearly see that there are many evident boxes. Like you see the calendar is within a card, which is a clear box. But even things within that, there are many other boxes. Like this text here is a box in itself. There's this sort of toggle bar here, which is again another box. And then again, within this, we have one big box right here with all of these dates, right? So I can just pull this up here, and this is one box. Just want to make it 20. So this is one box, and maybe there are more boxes within it, like this April 2024 at the top is one box as well. Right? So this is basically the first concept that you need to understand, which is that everything that you see on the web is basically a box, right? I hope that makes it clear, that helps you understand. And when you go to any website now today on the web, I hope you see it in a new sort of visual where you understand how each content is being rendered on your browser, right? So let's move on onto the second concept, which is margins, borders, and padding, right? This is something that has been developed over time. And this is again the contention that brought in because of these margins, borders, and paddings. And what these basically means, I'll explain it to you and I'll sort of walk you through about how a website is rendering different things, right? So let's imagine this is sort of your website and you have, let's say, just some text on it, right? So let's say this is some kind of content. It might not be text. It could be something like an image as well. It could be some video as well. It's just any random content, right? There are three things that you need to understand. There's margins, there's borders, and there's padding, right? So we'll start with something called borders. So the border is basically anything that is including or containing your content, right? So basically what that means, if I draw it here, right, and I'm going to draw like a very basic shape, just to give you an idea, I'm going to do a stroke. I'm going to make this 0%. So what you're seeing here is basically this box. And this box is not really like this, right? So like when you put things on your website, when engineers do this, what it really looks like is basically something more like this. It's really covered edge to edge, right? This is the border of your content, right? This is exactly edge to edge of your content, and it's not really leaving any space between the content. So this is what by default you have any content, whether it's text, whether it's image, or whether it's a video, You have content and you have a border. This black line represents the border of your content. Now, let me show you what we mean by margin and padding. And we're going to start with the more basic concept, which is margin, right? It's very easy to understand what a margin is. A margin is basically distance outside the border to anything else, right? So here on this web page, we don't really have anything else. We just have the website here. So I'm going to show you what the margin might look like over here. I'm going to draw an arrow right here that represents your margin. So anything from that border to outside, whatever next element there is. So the next element outside this is basically the edge of this screen itself. So it extends out to the edge of that screen. And I'm going to make this a full arrow just so it's easier to understand. So this line is representing what is called the margin, right? And I'm going to write this for all of you just so you understand it more easily. This is the margin here, right? This is what explains the margin. All right. So if you're saying like, okay, what should be the margin of this content? You can see this distance, which is around 492 pixels. So that is the margin. This is the top margin. Similarly, there are margins on the left, on the right, and at the bottom of the content here itself, right? Now, going to a different concept, which is called padding, right? And padding is a similar thing as the margin, but it's just the distance from the border to the content inside, right? So what that means here is like, if you go to any border, if you go up to the content, that is the padding, right? Now here by default, you're seeing like there is no space really, right? It's covering corner to corner of your content. So basically here in this case, what you're seeing is the padding here is 0. There is no padding at all, right? But you could provide it some padding. So what we'll do is we'll extend this border, right? And they're going to do something like this. We'll just place it here at a random place to show you. So when you do that, what happens is margin decreases, right? So the margin is anywhere from the border, any other element, which is in this case, the edge of the screen, right? Now that you see inside, we have some extra space from the border itself to the content inside, right? So now this space, and I'll make another arrow here just to show you what that means. We'll create something like this. Wait, just give me 1 second. All right, so we have this arrow here and we have this arrow here, right? So this is what we call padding, right? This is what we call padding. Similarly, this we also have on the content here, which will be something around this place. Let's see, something around this, right? So we have something like this, and I can just draw a guide here, show you what that means. I can bring a guide on the very edge of it, right? Something like this, and we have this as your padding, right? So what you're seeing here is basically this is the distance from this border to the content inside, right? So this, if you see the length of this is around 15 pixels. So that's your padding now. And if you see the margin here, that's around 479, right? So that's the top margin, and this is the top sort of padding, right? Which is around 15 pixels. Similarly, if you go on the left side, we have a different padding length, which is around 116 pixels, right? So this is again a very, very basic concept to understand, and this is how everything on your website is being structured, right? So if you look at any website layout, this is what you will see. You will have any content, and you will have space from that content to the border of that content, which will represent the padding, and from the border outside to the edge of the screen or to any other element here, which we'll call the margin. Okay, so I hope that makes it easier to understand. That's a very, very basic concept. Now, one very interesting thing is that, as I said at the start of the video, this is a very basic thing that is actually used on all of our websites today. So I'll just hop on to the website here, and I'll show you what this looks like. So I'm going to open up the Edge browser here, and we have Wikipedia open. And one easy way to sort of visualize how different elements are structured and what the margin and padding is, this is what I'll do. I'm going to right click here, and almost on any browser starting from Chrome, Edge, or even Safari, you will have an option called inspect. And this is a very common thing engineers or designers use to understand how websites are structured, right? So if you click right click and go to inspect, what you'll see here is basically each section of the website, and you'll see what styling is applied to the website, right? And if you see the whole website, there's this graphic here to show you, in fact, what are the dimensions of the content, which is here shown in blue. And when I'm hovering over it, you're seeing the content that it's showing for, right? So there's the blue content, there's the padding around it, right? You see represented by green, and outside it is the border. There's no border here, so you don't really see that on the website itself, right? So that's a very interesting thing, and you can basically go to any website and you can literally right click over an element, right? So let's say I want to see borders and padding of this sort of image here. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to say inspect. And what it's going to do, it's going to select that specific thing for myself. And if I go down here, I see the specific content here, which is this whole box, right? Which is very, very interesting, right? So you can go to literally any website and you can see what the margin and border are for different elements. And this sort of something, this sizing and everything, you will get used to it very easily after some time. But I think this is a good way to sort of test out different popular websites like Wikipedia, like go to Google and check it out for you to understand what the box model looks like, right? So I hope that gives you an idea of this very, very important and basic concept. Now, second thing that you really need to know about after sort of margins, borders, and padding is basically that it is all about the relationship between your boxes, right? So what does that basically mean, right? So let's say you have a website and you're trying to build up a website. You have to understand that what happens when you put up an element, let's say you're putting up just a box, right? You're not putting up any sort of image or text. Let's say you're just putting up a rectangle here, right? If you're trying to put this rectangle up here, what a browser by default does, it will put this content on the very top left of the screen. It will not put it at the center. It will not put it anywhere else. It will put it at the very top left, no matter what it is, right? When you put anything second, like let's say now I want to put a text here, right? I want to put a text on the website. I put a text. And what it will do by default, if I don't apply any styling to it, is that it will move it and will place it right below this box, right? Just like this, right? In fact, it will actually not give any padding or anything like that because it doesn't have any styling. It will just stick it just at the bottom of this box, right? So this is what happens if you put more text around here. You'll just do the same thing. You'll just put up it, or put up the text right beneath the other text, right? So this is new styling. This is default, right? So how does styling work? It is working through this idea of margins, borders, and padding, right? So you start to provide sort of guidance through styling as to like how these should be placed, how these different things should be related, right? So the thing is, like, let's say you will say that it should be centered, it should have a specific width, it should have a specific height, right? And you will place it, let's say, at the center of this whole screen. And what it's doing right here is creating a margin here, right? So you see this box now has a specific margin. So if I bring in the arrow from here that I was explaining, right? So I'll help you visualize this very easily. It's not a very hard concept. It's just something very basic for you to understand. It's creating this margin here, right? It doesn't have any padding yet, right? Let's say you put in some text inside it, right? When you say by default, put the text inside this box, what it'll do, it'll bring your text inside the box and stick it to the top left, right? It will stick it to the top left just like this. It won't do any styling to it. This is still not a very good website. So what you can do here is two things. You can put some margin to the text, right? You can say, okay, give it some height. Sorry, not height, but sort of like top margin. So it gives some sort of margin from the top. Or while your text is just here, you could say that, let's see, this is the box. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a padding here, right? And when you give a padding, it creates sort of a distance inside. So clear distance inside from the text, and you can give padding on both sides, right? So it creates some padding just like this. So you go here, what you see is that it has created some padding here, just like that, right? So there's some distance between your text and the actual edge of this sort of box. Now you don't obviously see these lines, but this is how you start styling. This is how things are starting to get rendered on the website. So everything that you put on a screen is by default getting to the left top edge of your screen. And in the styling page, you're using the concept of the box model where you're putting some padding, you're putting some margins, you're thinking about borders in order for giving to sort of explain how these different things are related, what is sort of inside another element, and how these elements should be placed inside other elements. Right. So this is a very basic concept, and this is basically top three things that you need to know, right? So basically summarize this, have this here. Everything on the web is a box. Margins, borders, and padding. These give you complete control of how things are structured. And that is basically about the relationship between all the different boxes, right? That is what the box model is all about. That is all you need to know in order to understand how different things are rendered. And this probably already makes you a great designer, a great engineer, right? So I hope this video has been helpful. If you liked it so far, hit a like button, right? Now, just before I end this video, I'll give you a very fun fact about the history of the box model, right? So when this model came initially in the web, we had something called the Internet Explorer, and we had initially very two common web browsers that people used. One was the Internet Explorer, the other was the Netscape, right? So what they did was they used this model, right? So they had content padding, border, and margin. And when you set like a width of a content, right? Let's say you say the width of 100 pixels. So what it means is like it was including a border, so it's padding. It was not just considering it as the width of the content, but it was considering that it's the content plus the padding plus the border is the width of the whole element, right? But when W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, which is the standard for today's world, right? Which was basically what I was explaining, is like content has a specific width, and that is what we refer to, or like what we mean when we say width. And everything outside that content is the padding, border, and margin. Those are separate things that you define separately. And there was some contention about this. Today, we still follow sort of the W3C box model. That is the most basic thing. When we say width, we basically mean this is the content, which could be any text or image. And then we consider the padding outside, we consider the border outside, and we consider the margin further outside that, right? But that was not the case when it was the Internet Explorer, right? It was a different thing. And you can find more information about this, just like quick Google search. This image is from Wikipedia. If you just search up box model, right? Now, after sort of this sort of contention about like what is the right model, we still use this sort of standard at the top, which is the W3C sort of World Wide Web Consortium standard. But there was some contention because like if you really think about real box, there were many people who were saying like if you really think about a box, we never talk about the width of a box as the width of the content inside it, right? We really mean the width of the box, the outside layer. We consider the padding inside, we consider the content inside, and we include all of that when we say the width of the box. So this model that the Internet Explorer had, that made more sense. The content, padding, border, that is what should mean the width of an element. It should not mean just the content, right? So that made more sense, and that makes more sense for designers. So there was a lot of tension around what model is the standard. And there's something interesting because for designers, if you're just designing on Figma or something like that, you will understand that probably this is what you mean, or this is what you actually see with your eyes, including the border and padding. You don't actually see just the content, right? So this makes more sense for designers. So today, what the World Wide Web Consortium has done, they have introduced sort of a new tag, which is called the box sizing tag, and there is a way to sort of define it. If you do so, what it will do is we'll use the Internet Explorer box model instead of the W3C box model. Right, so that's a very interesting fact that they have this new thing included just because there was some contention. But even then, when you talk about box model today, it's still the standard is still the W3C box model where you have content, that's what is representing with the width, and then you have the padding, border, and margin outside of that. So it's a really fun fact about this sort of history of the box model, and I just thought I would share it with you. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all for today's video, and I hope this has been useful, and really encourage you to sort of go out, check out different websites and go to inspect on your web browser and see how different things are structured. And also, when you're looking at websites, think about how different things are layered and rendered on top of each other. That will really help you become a better designer and better engineer. So if you like this video, if you like the content, I hope you like the video. Hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, especially how to sort of think about different designs, think about grids and things like that, I will have more videos on my channel about them. So yeah, subscribe to the channel if you like. Thank you.